Hello and welcome back for another GiantSlayerTV Top 10 video. Today's video will be a countdown of the top champions for all of Set 5. We're continuing our end of Set 5 series where we take a look back at the best of the best in regards to synergies, compositions, and now champions. The criteria here is similar to our other top list, as the main factor is going to be consistency across both Reckoning and Dawn of Heroes. Other factors include impact on the meta and the design of the unit. With all that said, let's go ahead and get started. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come, so be sure to also follow our GiantSlayerTV social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. Starting off our top 10, we have Gragas coming in at number 10. We found it important to highlight at least one champion per tier in the top 10, otherwise the list would have been entirely made up of 4 and 5 cost champions. As such, we narrowed down the top 1 cost pick down to everyone's favorite Chug Jug, Gragas. While there are plenty of iconic 1 cost champions to choose from, Gragas is set apart by how he remained one of the best early game champions for all of Set 5. That's a remarkable feat for any champion. What made Gragas so strong in the early game was the combination of healing provided by Dawnbringer, having higher health naturally thanks to Brawler, and of course the damage reduction of his ability. Those factors all came together to make Gragas one tanky boy. If the player had a weak opening board, then all they really needed to do was find Gragas and toss in a Brawler or Dawnbringer and slap some defensive items on Gragas. The effectiveness of defensive items is another reason as to why Gragas was so good in Set 5, as he made the perfect frontline item holder until the late game. It's worth noting that no, Gragas was not a hugely impactful champion beyond the early game. During the Dawnbringer vertical trait meta, it was common to see Gragas make it to the end game, but overall throughout Set 5 that was rare. The only other time we really got to see Gragas shine beyond the early game was the Chug Jug composition. The point is that a top tier champion doesn't have to be relevant all game, just having a huge impact on the early game is enough, and is why Gragas earns a spot in our top 10. Up next, we have Thresh coming in as the number 9 champion. Thresh is our choice for all-around best 2 cost champion of Set 5. There are plenty of contenders for this spot, but we have to acknowledge how much of a nuisance Thresh was the entire set. Thresh meant it was not safe to corner your carry, at least without some form of CC immunity. If a player didn't respect Thresh, well, guess what? Your carry was being pulled towards the middle of the board and probably died. Most sets seem to have some type of unit with the ability to pull in. Thresh was one of the more unique versions since it wasn't an instant pull and instead slowly dragged the hooked champion towards Thresh. There were plenty of champions and synergies that called for specific positioning in Set 5, but Thresh was one of the few that players always had to be aware of. As for the overall value of Thresh, he was by no means the strongest champion at any point in the set, but the utility provided for multiple compositions definitely cannot be understated. The main factor in our decision to place Thresh in the top 10 was partially consistency, but mainly the impact his design had on how the game was played. Let's move on to the champion coming in at number 8, Nunu. Abomination, as we've explored in our previous Set 5 videos, was overall one of the best compositions and synergies of the entire set. This is due to consistency, strength, and flexibility. At the core of Abomination, the most valuable champion was always Nunu. Callisto was mainly a trait bot for Abomination, and Brand, while useful, wasn't nearly as helpful in carrying Abomination. Rise and Fiddlesticks were both valuable but weren't always available, plus both of them only played in one half of the set. But Nunu, oh Nunu. Nunu was not only one of the best frontliners in tanking damage, Nunu also did quite a bit of work with his ability. Being capable of chomping down an enemy unit often meant a board with early Nunu always had the advantage. On top of that, an early Nunu also meant the possibility of Abomination, and we've already established just how good Abomination was in Set 5. So hats off to Nunu for being such a pivotal champion to the consistency of Abomination, while also being valuable as an early game frontliner for any board. With that, we continue down the list with Diana coming in at number 7. Our first high-cost champion on the list is Diana, an assassin champion that provided a ton of utility for multiple compositions throughout the set. In Reckoning, Diana was a key champion thanks to having 3 synergies of Assassin, Nightbringer, and Dragon Slayer. This meant she had her hand in a lot of compositions, particularly utilizing Nightbringer and Dragon Slayer. In the mid-set, she unfortunately lost Dragon Slayer, but was buffed to compensate for that loss. Despite having one less synergy, Diana still proved to be a stable mid to late game champion thanks to the utility of her ability. And that's surely where Diana shined, as her ability provided a way to disrupt the enemy backline. It also did alright damage, but what always mattered the most was causing chaos with her ability. Diana was also the best item holder for Frozen Heart and caused multiple nerfs to the item. Players would look back on Diana as a frustrating champion to play against while also acknowledging how impactful she could be on the game. Our final 3 cost on the list is Yasuo as the number 6 champion. We debated placing Yasuo further up on the list because he did have a huge impact on set 5. No other 3 cost champion comes close to the consistent carry potential of Yasuo. This is due to how well designed Yasuo's kit was, as both of his synergies helped boost his potential as a melee carry, while his ability gave him relevancy in the meta due to the bonus true damage it added. There's definitely plenty of metas where Yasuo was a top tier champion, but being a 3 cost unit definitely holds him back. There were plenty of times that Yasuo was nerfed and not all that strong, plus 4 and 5 cost champions tend to scale better. That's just the inherent limit to the strength of 3 cost champions. But even though he isn't in our top 5, Yasuo will always be considered one of the best champions of the set. Next up, we have Karma coming in at number 5. This spot on the list is a toss-up between Karma and Vel'Koz as the staple AP carries of the set. There are other potential candidates, but these by far were the 2 most consistent and iconic of the set. Vel'Koz is known for being a positional nightmare to play with and against, while Karma had a whole slew of balance issues throughout the set. It's a difficult choice to choose between these 2, but we had to go with Karma for a few reasons. Karma in Dawnbringer was the most dominant composition of the first half of set 5, to the point where the balance team had to question the strength of vertical traits. Sure, Vel'Koz was also occasionally part of a vertical composition with Redeem, but nowhere near as strong as Dawnbringer and Karma were. And as we said, Karma was one of the most changed 4 cost champions as they had to nerf and buffer multiple times. And honestly, the last reason is that Karma was entertaining to play as a carry. Dawnbringer was a bit boring of a vertical synergy, but Karma was a tamer version of Ahri. It was satisfying to watch Karma blow up backlines and ramp up in a fight. That design mixed with valuable synergies and consistency throughout all of set 5, so why we're giving the number 5 spot to Karma instead of a champion like Vel'Koz. The number 4 spot goes to a pair of champions, Lucian and Galio. In a normal top 10, we'd separate these 2 champions, but in a list of all of set 5, we had to put them together because their impact on the game was often in the same composition. Yes, Galio was one of the best solo frontliners, and Lucian certainly could carry without Galio. But the strength of these 2 champions was always better together than apart. Lucian was by far the best 4 cost champion for stabilizing at level 7, since he was capable of carrying even as a 1-star unit. Galio wasn't always the best tank, but definitely up there with the best. The beauty of these 2 champions was putting them together with Sentinel, the best overall trait in Dawn of Heroes. Unfortunately, since Lucian and Galio were only introduced in Dawn of Heroes, we can't put them higher on the list, but a 4th place spot is certainly respectable. Into our top 3 we go, with the number 3 champion being Teemo. Honestly, set 5 as a whole had somewhat lackluster 5 cost champions. Some had unique designs like Viego, but on average, most of them didn't truly stand out on their own. Generally, they were used in conjunction with other champions or weren't capable of carrying. Teemo, on the other hand, was not only one of the most unique champions we've ever seen in TFT, but also had his hand in a lot of the endgame compositions. First off, Cruel. Cruel was unique in multiple ways, with Teemo costing health instead of gold and instantly winning the fight if Teemo was against one enemy champion. That alone is enough for a spot in our top 10 because set 5 didn't have that many interesting synergies. But to take it one step further, Teemo also had an amazing ability. This ability did a boatload of damage, but also provided a lot of utility by slowing down the attack speed of enemies. So Teemo was unique, a powerhouse late game champion, and brought a good amount of utility to late game boards. The only reason he's not number 1 is that costing health meant Teemo was not always playable and mainly ended up on high roller boards. Coming in at number 2, we have Rell. Of course, Rell was going to be this high on the list. We spent most of set 5 praising Rell as one of the best frontliners in the game because she was, even if none of her synergies were active. Rell was super hard to kill, even more so with 3 defensive synergies, while also providing utility with shields and CC. We've already talked ad nauseum about how good Rell is, so we're going to let her spot as number 2 speak for itself. And finally, we've arrived at the end of the list with the number 1 champion being 3 champions, Ivern, Volibear, and Heimerdinger. Wait, 3 champions at number 1? Yes, folks, we are cheating here a bit by having 3 champions in the first place spot, but it makes the most sense. Ivern, Volibear, and Heimerdinger are by far the most iconic late game champions of the set and had a huge impact on the late game meta. Of course, it's worth pointing out that all 3 weren't always played together. That said, the strongest late game capped board was almost always these 3 champions. Ivern and Volibear are the staple Revenant duo throughout the set. Heimerdinger had a lot of rough patches, but when Heimerdinger was good, he was good. No other late game carry came close to the damage a Heimerdinger 2 could put out in his prime. It just didn't seem right having to split these 3 up, so it made the most sense to have them all collectively take our number 1 spot. And that's the end of our top 10 champions for set 5. But before we go, we've got a few honorable mentions to talk about. Our first honorable mention is Mordekaiser. Mordekaiser influenced the first half of the set 5 quite a lot as a common frontliner for multiple compositions, particularly with Draven and Yasuo. There was a giant hole in the meta after he was removed in the mid set, which speaks volumes as to how much of an impact Mordekaiser had. But he wasn't the best frontliner and was only in the game for a short while, so unfortunately, we couldn't give him a spot in our top 10. Another champion that was removed in the mid set was Kindred. Kindred is often overlooked because the value they brought to the game was definitely muted compared to other champions. But being a 5-cost mystic with an ability that prevented death made Kindred a staple of late game compositions. Sadly, Kindred was a victim of the meta as Rangers never really stood out in Reckoning and Mystic wasn't always necessary. Plus, the removal in the mid set wasn't anywhere near as devastating to the meta as Mordekaiser's was. And our final honorable mention is Lulu. Lulu was quietly one of the best support champions of the set. Not only was she key for Hellion boards, Lulu was also used to boost the attack speed of carries like Aphelios, Draven, and Yasuo. Splashing Lulu in was also relatively easy because of Mystic, but also in late game boards that utilized Teemo. Lulu was certainly not the flashiest champion of the set, but definitely had a lot of value. Alright folks, that's all we have for you for today. It was tough to narrow down the top champions of set 5 to just 10. There's so many units that could have made it on our list but didn't. With that in mind, we'd love to see everyone's personal top 10 champions in the comment section below. Do you agree with our list, or is your top 10 drastically different? Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.